who are listening, this is pretty much a message for the people of Egypt. I'm speaking here with Abu Abdullah. My name is Abu Hamza, and inshallah this helps the people who may be listening and who are involved in what's going on over there in Egypt right now. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
So basically, what do you think what's happening over there right now? How did this all start? What's the deal here?
As of today, which is a Friday afternoon here, Eastern Standard Time in the U.S., I assume it's about 7 or 8 hours later in Egypt, so it would probably be about 11, close to midnight in Egypt. The tyrant of Egypt has finally stepped down. Was forced to step down. A lot of people don't understand this. Mubarak stepped down because he finally had no choice. He didn't step down because he chose to.
Right.
There are several issues and several factors ruled in his decision to step down. Basically, to sum it up, after 17, 18 days of massive demonstrations across Egypt, most visibly in Tahrir Square or Independence Square or Liberation Square in Cairo, several events behind the scenes were taking place. There were a lot of things happening behind the scenes in the arena of power that were not visible to the people in general, and were not necessarily spoken of in the media. One is that the massive demonstrations brought the country to a halt. The industry, the work, administration, but most importantly, it also brought the administration of the country, the government of the country, to a halt. First, of course, it were the employees of the government, administrative employees like directors of offices and departments of ministries that manage everything from agriculture to information to health and sanitation and all of the departments. The demonstration eventually brought these these government agencies to a halt. But eventually, after as the weeks of demonstrations stretched on, other more important and critical centers of government power ground to a halt, ground to basically a tired, exhausted halt. And these are like the police departments, for example. This happens in every revolution. This is actually one of the main factors why rebellions, revolutions, demonstrations ultimately must succeed, is that you have basically depending on the country, but more or less a factor of 100 to 1 demonstrators to police, generally. While the demonstrators, if they persist, if they truly believe in their cause and understand, especially if they understand this point, if they persist in their demonstrations, they will eventually just simply wear out the police.
So if I may cut you off here, so basically, it's not over yet. Those people should not be going anywhere just yet.
Well, that's we can get to that. There's a few stages that need stages about the configuration of power in Egypt, okay, and in most countries, that need to be understood clearly to come to that point where the Egyptians have to understand. If they leave now, it would be like somebody who's playing a chess game and has finally checkmated the king and then decided to quit.
Wow!
It really is that simple when you truly understand what happened. It's
theirs to lose then.
Absolutely. But back again to the points, and truly, this is a game of chess. This kind of coups and the demonstrations, revolutions, rebellions, and so forth and so on. These are really, one should look at them as a game of chess. Well, everything from the local type demonstration all the way out to the national, even regional revolution. They should be approached as a game of chess. And in fact, this is the reason why chess is called the game of kings. Because in a chessboard, you have basically all the outlines of a government, from the king to the queen, which might represent the agencies that directly protect the king, like his secret service, his mukhabarat in the case of Egypt, to the pawns, the people who support him. Maybe in our case, the pawns would have been those Giza camel jockeys that came in with batons and guns and quickly wore out after a couple of days, were worn out by the massive size of the Egyptian revolution. And were eventually, alhamdulillah, the Egyptians actually they responded correctly to those hooligans that were brought in by the regimes, by the regime, and those would be like pawns of the regime. And you have the bishop, which would be the religious institutions. In the case of Egypt, I believe it was Tantawi, if he didn't already croak. I don't know if it was replaced. It's been a while since I checked on. But it would be someone like the former Mufti of Egypt, Tantawi.
Right.
Who would come in, of course, and make statements and figure out all kinds of... and all these statements, they're like a game of chess. They're meant to dissuade, to persuade, to divide the other side.
Right.
And all the way to the rook, which might represent, the government fortresses, the government buildings and ministries, the presidential palaces in the case of Egypt, to of course the knights, which would represent possibly the informants and the spy services, the intelligence services, the secret services, the ones that are a little more dangerous in their behavior, right. More violent and more dangerous and more more deadly in their behavior. The ones that are less expected. That's why the knight moves in such a strange way on the board.
Right.
Because they have an unexpected kind of behavior. You have to think it ahead before you can... But truly, the game of chess is known as the game of kings because there are so many parallels to that game, to what happens in everything from a revolution to even wars. Even in wars are pretty much designed in a similar way or fought with a lot of the details that one sees on a chessboard. And so what happened is that one of the points that needs to be understood in these demonstrations is that the advantages of those rebelling, you have to know your advantages and you have to know your fortes, your strengths, as opposed to your opponent. Now, whether you want to do this peacefully or you want to do this by whatever it takes, it depends on your condition and the conditions of repression and also the conditions by which the desired outcome can be brought about. If there is, quote-unquote, a democratic system, or if there is any respect for human rights, then of course one should do it as peacefully as possible and simply play, quote-unquote, play the game. Of course, this is no game. Lives are at stake, freedoms of human beings are at stake, and ultimately the fates of millions of people. But there is a game side to it, a strategy side to it, a strategic side to this that must be understood by the people. So this is what we're concerned about. If they're concerned about winning, right. If they want to win, they certainly need to understand these details. It'll make for their actions to be more efficacious, more effective, and ultimately, by Allah's grace and might, succeed in achieving the freedom and liberation of their nation that they desire.
I mean, yeah. So, I mean, in terms of what's happening right now, then who are the players on the government side, and what are they doing?
Well, about the strengths, the people's main strength is their numbers. Okay, it's 85 million Egyptians, 84, let's say. You take out about 1 million at the most between police and secret services, informants, spies, snitches, and the government and his family, and all the party members, the sham bogus party, parliament and parliament members, and whoever happens to be aligned with them, right. And of course the government, the government party. Politburo, I guess, of party members that are aligned with the government. But at the very most, those people constitute a soft million, By soft, what I mean is basically how far are they willing to clench to the president, to the tyrant, to the king in the game, before they decide to switch their allegiances or simply abandon the field of the game. And the vast majority of those who would support the tyrant, well, a lot of them would be willing to make sacrifice their lives for him.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, for how much? 200 bucks or something?
Yeah. In a lot of countries, though, the military would side with the government and would be willing to kill people, and that's a game changer. In the case of Egypt, they are very fortunate that their military, actually I should say the middle ranks, captains, lieutenants, up to colonels possibly, and lieutenant colonels and so forth and so on, were a more enlightened minority of officers in the Egyptian army. This is truly actually what allowed this to happen this time around in Egypt, is that enlightened minority of middle rank officers in the Egyptian army. That somehow they had they understood that and they had respect for the will of the people. Somehow they had learned somewhere, whether it's an Islamic tradition of the Egyptian army that goes back 1400 years, 1300 or so, or whether it is a mixture of factors. They seem to have a firm belief that the people of Egypt should be able to decide their fate ultimately if they want to do so. And
right.
That's what the demonstration and this revolution did, is that the people basically finally said, look, we want to decide our fate. And when they did so, by Allah's grace, there were people in the army and elsewhere in the government who were willing to respect that call and that voice, that voice of that petition of the people,
right.
the demand of the people. But again, the important factor, the strength of the people, is their numbers. Now, how do you use that strength against the strengths of a tyrannical, oppressive regime? In the case of Egypt, the strength of the regime, of course, is a pure repression. It's pure brute force. In the case of Egypt, it's not always the same. In America, the strength of the regime is not necessarily its brutal force. Americans are, some of the most armed people in the world, citizens in the world. So if it came to it, if it came down to it, to a matter of brute force, there's no way anybody could face off against the people willing to defend themselves. I mean, the U.S. Army, with all of its brutal force, they couldn't even handle the Afghani civilians with with Kalashnikovs. Even with all the amenities of propaganda, warfare, false flag terrorism, and poverty, boycotting, besieging, the help of all the neighbors against the poor Afghanis, and a whole slew of advantages that the U.S. Army has. And despite all that, a U.S. occupying soldier would have to think twice before he steps out of his base unprotected by a couple of inches of armor.
Right. Yeah, and that's been shown, like you said, over and over again. So.
Yeah, and this is a population of only 25 million Afghanis who have been occupied, repressed, murdered by both Russian Orthodox Christians and American Protestant Catholic Christians and Zionist Jews.
Right.
In their majority.
So basically, it's just terror then on the other side. They're just
but the point I'm trying to make, that, for example, in the U.S., even if the soldiers are completely brainwashed monkeys, in the sense that they would obey an order of their commander to shoot their own citizens, which I think actually a lot of the U.S. military, a lot of them would do that.
Right.
There's no real. This is what a lot of Americans don't understand about themselves. A lot of Americans think this. They talk freedom, but I don't think they really understand the concepts that they blabber about that are in the Constitution of the United States. The concepts of freedom, respect for the other. I think a lot of Americans, and they show it every day, when someone disagrees with them, if they could just go get a gun and shoot them, they would.
Right.
If it weren't for the brutal force of the police or being afraid of going to jail,
right.
Be thrown in a hole somewhere, they would just do what they go back to the old days of the Wild West. So while the concepts of justice and freedom, and there's a couple of others that are important in the American Constitution that I'm having trouble putting out of my head. But a lot of people assume that Americans understand this, and I don't think Americans are the majority. There is a minority of intellectuals and others who might speak these things and actually understand them and abide by them. But the vast majority of Americans, and I have a way to prove this. It's not complicated. It's actually very simple to prove that when it comes down to push and shove, if they can get away with just shooting the other side and murdering them, they would.
Yeah.
And as far as freedom, the concept of freedom of speech and freedom of opinion, freedom of thought and freedom of belief and freedom of religion, all these these Islamic concepts that the founding fathers, such as Thomas Jefferson, plagiarized wholesale out of his own personal copy, his personal 2-volume copy of the Quran that, in his own words, was
his favorite book or something, right?
That's exactly what he said. In his own words, it was his favorite book in his collection of 3,000 or so texts.
That's right, yeah.
Not only that, actually, it is actually ascertained elsewhere that Thomas Jefferson had stated that he read the Quran every single day.
SubhanAllah.
Every single, but the thing for me is I don't need him to say this. When I look at the American Constitution and Thomas Jefferson and Adams and others around in that circle of founding fathers, when I look at what they're saying and I compare it to what was available in Europe where they came from, clearly these ideas of freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of thought, freedom of opinion, the ability to speak to your leader straight in the face and oppose them and tell them you're wrong, this culture does not exist in Greece or Rome, and certainly not in European Christianity, medieval or post-medieval, not even Renaissance or Reformation Europe. These concepts are completely alien in Europe.
Right.
And we're alien to the vast majority of Americans who run away from Europe because of exactly that very harsh and extreme persecution. We're talking about, outright murder and massacre of whole groups of people in Europe.
Right.
Many of them, they have finally made it with their skins to the American shores. And so when you look at these ideas, you go, where did they get this? And the only tradition in the whole known universe where someone could walk up to the leader of the free world and say, you know what, you're wrong. The only time you find this is in Islam. Like, as for example, the case of that old lady who walked up to the caliph, the second successor of the Prophet Muhammad, Caliph Omar, the conqueror of the 90% of the known world at the time. She walked up to him right there. This is the leader of the free world at the time. The rest of the world was was either had been was under Islamic rule, or it was some Germanic backwater or some Chinese Mongolian backwater, with no civilization of any kind, certainly no large settlements. And so when she walked up to him and criticized him, she says, "You were a nobody before, and we made you what you are," in his face. And instead of turning back and say, "You old hag, what do you know about it?" he actually just puts his head down right there in the street, and puts his head down, and his eyes got tearful, and basically was humbled by this old nobody. And this wasn't a famous woman or some relative or some neighbor or anything. And the fact, of course, is that Omar, the leader of the free world, we're talking, basically the Muslim world at the time, the Muslim empire, was the uncontested leader of the world. Nobody else would lift their hand to the Muslims at the time. Anyone who did was quickly squashed or put down. As far as of course, we're not talking about occupation here or conquest. We're talking about freeing the people of the world from China all the way to Paris from previous oppressions, religious and otherwise. But we're talking about those oppressive leaders, those kings and tyrants and emperors, had all been put down one by one within literally the first 50, 70 years of the rise of Islam. And this man Omar was the leader of that world. I don't want to use the word empire because it has European and Roman and Greek tragic connotations about murdering people and stealing their resources, which Muslims, of course, did not do. Muslims did not, Islam did not as the enemies of Islam always claim, did not spread by the sword. And the proof for that is simple. You go to any of these battles where Muslims are involved, and you find out that no civilians were ever harmed. Not a single civilian was ever harmed as Islam spread literally from Canton, China, all the way out to the gates of Paris and the gates of Vienna. No civilians, no man, woman, or child, or even beast of burden was ever harmed. Ever.
Very interesting.
By those Muslim armies as they spread the message of Islam. And the message of Islam is, by the way, for those who find religion abrasive or simply have this Christian, Judeo-Christian inherited hatred for religion because of the horrible histories of Christianity and Judaism. Now we should like to put their reactive hate at ease. We should put it at ease, and that it's misinformed when it's directed at Islam.
Huh.
Yeah. But so the founding fathers, a lot of his ideas were right out of Islamic tradition. I don't mean just the written tradition. I mean the Islamic practiced tradition of the times, whether in North African Emirates, all the way out to Middle Eastern Emirates, all the way to Muslims in as far away that were encountered by the Christians in the Philippines and Indonesia.
Very interesting. Hold that thought for just a second. Hold on. All right, Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Can you hear me? Okay, you're coming in better now. For some reason, it was coming a little bit broken up.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So basically, what you're saying is that these people in Egypt right now, the Muslims in Egypt, basically they're just following a long tradition of Islam, basically.
Well, they're going back to a long tradition of Islam.
Right.
Long tradition of it started out back actually in Mecca, 1400, 1300 some years ago. With the first, with the Prophet, peace be upon him, basically coming, the message of Islam. This is the difference between the message of Islam and the message of most of these preachers and ministers and even other guys, Muslim proselytizers or Buddhists or whatever else. It wasn't one that, here I'm going to give you happiness. Islam never, the Prophet never promised happiness on earth to anybody. He never said, I'm going to make you rich, I'm going to make you happiness.
That's right.
The message of Islam was, here are, and there's two sides to the message, but I'm going to concentrate on the worldly one, is that people should be free to worship their maker. And no one should force them to worship. Islam, the word worship has a very technical meaning. It means to obey.
Right.
To obey unconditionally.
Their maker.
Yeah. So when the Prophet, peace be upon him, called people to worship one God, the other side of that coin is that no one else should be worshipped. No one else should have the right or the privilege or the power to force people to obey him or her unconditionally. And when I say no one, not simply a man, but even an ideology or a concept or an institution. No one should say, you're going to do what I tell you all the time, no matter what, whether you agree with it or not, whether it's rational or not.
Yeah.
That's worship. And in Islam, that's completely forbidden. It's not allowed. You're not allowed to obey anybody unconditionally. If what they say is rational and logical, and then fine, you have the choice to obey or not. But if it isn't rational, by which I mean, if it isn't according to the basic laws of nature, then obviously not. The Islam says simply to disobey such an order, which is exactly what the soldiers in in Egypt did when they were told to shoot the Egyptian
unarmed people.
Unarmed people. They said, that's crazy. We're not going to do that. If you go back to the very beginning of the revolution, the first few days, the whole world was like just simply waiting for the army to shoot the people.
Absolutely, yeah.
Which is something the police was doing.
Yeah.
The cops, some of those cops, some of those police, especially the more overzealous pawns, to use a chess terminology, the pawns of the regime, they were shooting at people. They were beating them up. They were arresting them. They were.
I think they're still doing it now to some extent in some places.
Yeah,
just yesterday.
Yeah. There's a few idiots who didn't get the memo. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're going to go back right back to doing that. In fact, most of those police they are unreformed thugs.
Huh.
And that actually is just a conversation we should have some other day about police. The Islamic tradition concerning police.
Right.
Islam actually does not allow police. A police force is forbidden in Islam. It's not allowed.
Forbidden?
Yes, it's actually forbidden in Islam. But if you remind me some other day, bring it up. And, yeah, that's exactly the reason why police, unlike the military, which is completely counterintuitive to most people, the police were the ones massacring the people.
Huh.
And military actually stood back and refused, even though the military are trained to kill, and the police are not trained to kill.
Interesting.
Well, in large scale.
Yeah.
That's not their main training. Their main training is to restrain people.
The one with the big guns,
Exactly. Yes, that's exactly right. The military are trained to die and to kill. The soldiers are. The police are not trained to die. Nobody says to the police, you might die.
Right.
It's a slight possibility depending where you work, but generally the police don't go into the police force because they expect to die.
Exactly.
Or they expect that, unlike a soldier.
Yeah.
That they might make the quote-unquote ultimate sacrifice, as the propagandists like to call it.
Right. Okay, so
in the case of the U.S., that's the founding fathers understood because they read a lot. And they read a lot about Islamic culture and tradition of personal freedom, which is what Islam brought to the world. It brought an idea of personal freedom, that a human being is born without shackles from his mom. No one is born with chains on his legs. So if God didn't create anybody with chains on their arms and legs, then no one should put humans in chains and shackles. Sorry.
Yeah.
And in fact, this idea actually, this is not new. A lot of people don't have a historical perspective, and they don't understand that. Just the last statement I made. If you made it anywhere in the world outside of Islam, 250 years ago, it would have sounded revolutionary. In Paris, in London, in pagan China. In pagan India would have been, are you nuts? Of course there are social structures. In Europe, the response would have been, well, the king is appointed by God. He's divinely appointed. And the whole royal family and the nobility, they have privilege by appointment of the divinely appointed king or queen.
Right, the Pope still is.
Yes, these are divine structures of society. There must be the rich and the poor, the ruling and the ruled. This is the way things work. There are, even in England today, there are the royal institution of the Queen is probably, I'd say if you took a poll, easily 20-30% of the Britons, especially the English, would want to keep that royal institution. Not only want to keep it, they would want it to perpetuate, because they see it as something of a given in their country, as part of their of any government of their country. Even as they have supposedly democratic elections and everything else, the royal institution is still there, and there's still this whole Camelot fantasy, if you want to. About watching their weddings and their ceremonies and so forth and so on, and everybody is beholden in awe of the statements and blabberings of the queen or king or prince or whoever may be making a proclamation. Do you understand this?
Yeah, yeah.
In India, the caste system is part of the goddamn religion. It's part of Hinduism. The Hinduism that so many foolish imbeciles are out there propagandizing in the West as some kind of liberation theology, of some kind of spiritual liberation. And it has a caste system ingrained in it. You couldn't take them apart.
A slave system ingrained in it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a five-level or five-class caste system. It goes all the way from a ruling to a priestly to a soldier class to a working class to the untouchables. And the untouchables, the majority of the population would be people who are basically so filthy, so dirty, so unblessed that you shouldn't touch them because they're impure. This is part of the goddamn religion. And people are still in the 21st century blabbering about this. And the funny part is there are scholars perpetuating this classism, this inhuman ideology. There are people who should know better in the 21st century and should not tolerate this garbage, and they do, and they write books about it. But Islam doesn't tolerate this. If you came to a Muslim, an erudite, any Muslim really, and you say, well, in our society we have two classes, or three, or four, or five. You know, these are chosen because, you know, because of their genes, because of their forefathers, because of their genealogy, because of whatever, to be the rulers, and these over here, they're you know, they're the ruled, or these are superior, these are inferior, in whatever way you want,
Right.
Intellectually, spiritually, governmentally, in however you want it. The Muslim would laugh. He would laugh at you. Even the stupidest Muslim would look at you and say, "God doesn't God doesn't play favorites." And this is the part that Muslims forget about their religion. This is what Muslims don't understand anymore about their religion. They forgot it. This is why Muslims, for all their attempts at imitating the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, can't rise to that level. They don't understand that the companions were free agents. You understand? And that's why it was Umar, that ruler of the free world, truly free world, and that's simple propaganda, who on this theme, on this topic of freedom, personal freedom, he said, when let me try to remember the exact. متى استعبدتم الناس وقد ولدتهم أمهاتهم أحرارا. When or whence did you enslave people and their mothers bore them free?
So he said that.
Yes, Omar said this 1300 years ago, 13 centuries ago. The ruler of the free world. And the problem is, of course, most people today, Muslims and non-Muslims, they don't understand how revolutionary this idea was even 200 years ago.
Yeah.
In fact, actually, really, if you can just step out of your cave and just, you know, just meander a little, you know, a couple of miles away from your home. I don't care where you live outside the Muslim world, whether you're in Buddhist China or Hindu India or in the Midwest in America. You step away a few miles away from your home into the sticks and you'll find people who still don't understand this, who still have allegiances to other men, who have masters who tell them what to think and what to believe. And in the West, it's actually, it's even more nefarious. While unlike in India, I'm talking about the unenlightened masses, you know, there might be a force of tradition or a force of institution that you know, that keeps these poor, oppressed, and educated people into this shackled mindset that they must obey some creep, some jackass, some maharashi, some guru. Simply not because of any great wisdom or any kind of great work or any kind of great or wise leadership, but simply because of who, you know, because of the suit he happens to be wearing, or because of the genes he happens to have inherited.
Yeah.
Not through any personal accomplishment. But even in the West, even in Europe, in Western Europe, forget those, you know, those Slavic, well, still enslaved people in Eastern Europe. Even in Western Europe, even in the United States of America, there are jackasses out there who are still enslaved. But it's a soft slavery. It's a soft slavery in the sense that its grip is made of silk instead of being the claws of some thug working for the Mubarak regime.
Interesting.
You understand? For example, in America, you can't criticize the goddamn Zionist thuggish ideology.
Right. You could criticize other Americans.
You can criticize anyone that's irrelevant.
Exactly.
Including the president, because he's goddamn irrelevant. You see? That's the thing. But if you start touching on the seat of power, if you start clawing at the seat of power, suddenly that soft power, that soft tyranny, it raises its ugly head and starts to uncover its teeth at you. In Western Europe, it's even worse. You criticize you criticize the Zionist power in Western Europe. You could go to jail. Sure. You decide that you want to revise the numbers of the Holocaust in the Western in World War II. Not necessarily deny it, but simply you say you want to discuss the numbers and you want to study and you want to research the numbers. You would think this is reasonable, right?
Sure, yeah.
You go to jail.
It's like blasphemy or something.
Exactly. It's their goddamn tyrannical religion.
Huh.
And that's what all these secular jackasses are blabbering against religion. They don't realize that that's exactly what you got. You just call it something else. I mean, that's like calling a jackass a donkey, and then suddenly everything is fine.
Huh.
But you haven't done anything. In all religions, there are certain things that are sacred. They call them sacred cows, people who want to make fun of them.
Yeah.
So it means certain things that in every religion, there are certain things that are sacred. You don't touch. You don't make fun of. You don't joke about. And you certainly don't go against or disobey.
Right.
Okay. There are a lot of other things that, do whatever you want. Fine. In most religions. You can make fun of your friend in the same religion. You can even rob him in some religions. You can oppress him. That's fine. But if you insult or profane whatever is their sacred quote unquote cows, well, all hell will break loose. Basically, then it's worse than if you killed somebody.
Right.
For example, in Hinduism, if you happen to bring publicly some harm to a cow,
right,
in a public manner, or if you happen to, they have this sacred cow, so to speak. There, in Buddhism, if you happen to push over a statue of Buddha, I assume that would be considered a blasphemy in there. In Christianity, the cross.
Right.
In Judaism, if you criticize the rabbis, any community's rabbi, and you make fun of him, or you oppose him, or you show how stupid he was, or how idiotic his resolutions are, in that community, you'll be ostracized or thrown out.
Right.
In Islam, we don't have any such sacred cows. Our sacred cows are justice.
Interesting.
You understand? They're the divine attributes of the Almighty, which no one should make fun of unless you are unkind, unjust, unmerciful. You're just, unless you're, a walking dead, insensitive zombie. Do you understand?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, some would say, of course, what about the Prophet ﷺ? The Prophet ﷺ is respected and venerated because he is the messenger of these important things.
Right. But wouldn't he be off limits as well, though? I mean,
because of this.
Right.
When you make fun of him, because the Prophet ﷺ, why is he a prophet? He's not a messenger because he brought us a class system or a racist system. He's not venerated or respected because he told us Arabs are better than the non-Arabs. In fact, he said the opposite. He said that that there is no difference between an Arab and non-Arab, a white and a black.
Right.
The only difference between any of you, and he was speaking to a majority Arabs at the time. And he said the only difference amongst you with God is your piety. Either you're a righteous, pious, decent human being, then good for you. If you're not, you're just a lowlife. That's the translation of the hadith.
Yeah.
Which, of course, I don't think there's anybody who would disagree with this.
Yeah.
Except, of course, Actually, that's not true. There's a whole bunch of racist, bigoted jackasses who actually disagree with this. In the 21st century, they still didn't get this message. And these are the revolutionary ideas that Islam brought 1400 years ago, that even Christians, Jews, Hindus, Buddhists, secularists still didn't get through. Even secularists. A lot of secularists, socialists, liberals, and all this, they think that they have a comeuppance on these bigots, these low-life Neanderthals from Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, and the very low-life kind of racism that's very easy to tell apart. But even secularists, you look at, for example, in genetic studies. There's a lot of genetic studies out there. Not all of secularists, of course, subscribe to this garbage. But there's a lot of genetic discussion boards and genetic studies out there that are trying to imply, first of all, that there is such a thing as race, which is silly. There's such a thing as color tones of skin. But to speak of a race itself is really very silly.
It's differentiate. It's
silly.
Making groups.
It's not just making groups. The groups don't exist. Let me explain. Let me try to see if I can find you an example. Let's say you know a lot about cars. So everybody, sees cars everywhere. It's like me trying to organize cars by their color. Imagine all the colors in the world, with all the colors out there. I don't care. Whatever, green, beige, pink, black, white, whatever. I come in and I go, well, there are 4 kinds of colors, 4 kinds of cars in the world. There's the bluish ones, the reddish ones, the greenish ones, and then there is the darkish ones.
So then you go around looking, and sure enough,
no, and you can literally organize all cars in these 4 colors, because these are the 4 colors that you use in one of the color palettes.
Yeah.
Those color spectra that they use for painters and stuff.
Right.
Your television, with 3 colors, the 4 colors, the black, which is absence of color, and the green, blue, and yellow pixels, you can create just about every other color.
Right.
So now I go around and I go, that color over there, beige, that's the bluish race right there.
Yeah.
Oh, that one right there, that's got that, that's pink. That's closer to reddish. That's the reddish race of colors. They tend to be criminals. They tend to be stupid. They tend to be this. Oh, that one over there, that color over there, that purple, that's kind of bluish. They tend to be
undeserving of freedom.
Yes, they tend to be incapable of democracy. And you got these these SOBs, Sons of Babylon, who actually put this stuff out there.
Yeah.
Now, is that a good classification of cars?
No, clearly not.
Does that actually mean anything? And that's what these SOBs, the Sons of Babylon, are doing. What I'm trying to say is pigmentation of the skin, the coloring of the skin, is only one of about 19,000 genes in the human body.
Right. Yeah.
So imagine you take that one gene, put it at the top of the column, and to get the other 18,999 genes.
That's just a very small.
Sick twisted SOB to try to pull this one off on people. Right. Now, and I do understand that sometimes the color, quote unquote, gene, the pigmentation, can travel in groups with other genes. But even with that, you still can't speak of race in the way that these racist Christians and Jews, because this is where it starts from. It starts with these pagan religions. Well, not just Christianity and Judaism. Christianity and Judaism just happen to be the ones that got globalized in the past 5 centuries and carried out this trash across the planet. Which,
right, there were hundreds, or probably thousands.
But what do you call it? That Buddhism, same trash.
Yeah.
Confucianism, same trash. You go to the Chinese, speak to your typical provincial, parochial, nincompoop, redneck Chinese, and he's more racist than any white Christian's ever been.
Yeah.
That's why all those Chinese grandmothers in America always sneer at people who pass them by, in case you didn't figure it out. Okay?
The ones who sell stuff in New York City.
No, the first generation.
Oh.
No, of course, this it does mean that this has nothing to do with the Chinese or the European or the Arab or whatever people as God created them. This has to do with these religious ideas, these traditions that they are born into,
Right.
that their fathers and mothers teach them from the day they're born. These ideas, racist, bigoted, it's just silly, stupid, irrational ideas. So we have strayed from our topic.
Okay, I was going to say, okay, so with all this stuff that, you know, these Islamic concepts of freedom, then what's going on now? Because look at all these so-called Muslim countries now.
There's been more attacks against Muslims from Indonesia to Muslims in Spain than any other group in history, by far, probably 100-fold. You take, for example, the Hindus.
Okay.
And you look at the history of the Hindus prior to Islam, if the little bit that's available, which is really not much, by the way, and the number of attacks against them are minimal. There was one Indo-European Nordic attack that changed somewhat the demography. I forget exactly what millennium. And a few others here and there, but nothing compared to what you see in Islam. Crusades alone, just completely uncalled for and justified warmongering bigotry from the European Christians. There's been 7 or 8 of those crusades. Each one of them,
more brutal than the next, I guess.
More comical in its justifications than the previous one, if they weren't so horrid. If they weren't so murderous, one would sit back and read the history of how they came about, the reasoning, the internal Christian reasoning as to why we should go 1,000 kilometers, 2,000 kilometers across the Mediterranean and go murder a bunch of people, you know, a bunch of brown or whatever, whatever color you choose for them, and steal their land.
Right.
And it's been ongoing even before.
So this is a part of that, basically.
Yellow Horde, the Eastern Yellow Horde. From the Eastern Yellow Horde, massive attack of the Mongols to the Western Yellow Horde of the last couple of decades of the Anglo-Americans. In between, literally hundreds of attacks by Buddhists, Chinese, non-Muslims. Hindus, the Sasani, the Persian Empire, the pagan Persian empires, the Russian, and the Romans. Before that, continual attacks, even at the time of the Prophet's Muslim, in fact. Actually, right off the beginning, even while still in Mecca, the Arab pagan tribesmen, several battles against the Prophet's Muslim and his companions until they were finally defeated.
And Romans, Persians.
And on and on. It just never stops. Huh. And then, of course, the colonial and imperialist, Christian and colonial imperialist period of the last 500 years.
Huh.
Yeah, more attacks on Muslim countries and continual attacks on Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, Egypt. And all of these attacks were about one thing: distancing the Muslims from their tradition. Now, the more important thing is this. While your typical savage imbecile, you know, your foot soldier had no freaking clue, was driven mainly by the same things that your American foot soldier was driven to war in Iraq and Afghanistan, by thugs like that racist Jew, Michael Savage, or that other fat pig, Rush Limbaugh.
Yeah.
Justifications basically of pure racism, just unadulterated, filthy hatred.
Right.
At the very top, way beyond the president, at the very top, the justification, the ethos of this whole killing and attacks on Muslims is a deep fear that these ideas of free individuals would spread to Europe and America and China and the rest of the world. Huh. Because then they would need a repressive, thuggish regime like Mubarak to keep their people down. They couldn't keep them down with just pure soft power, with invisible shackles made of silk. They would need brute force, the same kind of brute force that was needed to squash the Muslim.
Right.
You get it?
Yeah.
So
couldn't look like nice guys anymore then.
Yeah, you couldn't. The president couldn't just get in a nice suit and go on TV and say, well, no one shall question the goddamn war because you're unpatriotic. Because you're Muslim, you're typical Muslim individual. I don't even say citizen, because even the concept of citizenry is alien to Islam.
Right.
I'm not a citizen of your state or your country. You can't just draw a line in the ground and expect me to be your herd, your sheep.
So basically, this ultimate monotheism.
And that's why this is completely lost in Americans now. They don't even even the ones who blabber about this, because they don't understand the Islamic source of these ideas. They don't truly understand what's going on. That's why the founding fathers were against an idea of a national ID.
Huh.
Even while they were creating and carving out a state away from the British, and some of them looked on passively, as of course it was being stolen from the natives.
Yeah.
And some of them looked on passively as slaves were dragged in here, and some of them spoke out against it.
Yeah.
And some of them, of course, and a lot of them were for it. But of the founding fathers, I think they were more enlightened. They truly understood the Islamic outlook. Some of them chose personal benefit or national quote-unquote benefit and interest, and some of them were quiet because they realized it was wrong what was going on, especially since they were blabbering about all these ideals for white people, all these Islamic ideals that they wanted for white people. And some of them actually spoke out and opposed them, like Thomas Paine. He just simply, basically, didn't want to have anything with this, with a lot of these religious ideas, these Christian, Judeo-Christian, biblical, ideas.
So I mean, so that's a pretty bold statement, though. You're saying Muslims are actually, or the rest of the world, Christianity and Judaism and the rest, they're more enslaved right now than the Muslims are.
Absolutely, their freedom marches through Muslims. If the Muslims are not free again, like they got 1,1400 years ago, and that ultimately freed the world and brought all this enlightenment that we see in Europe and across the globe for the past 200 years, if Muslims don't get liberated again, the Christians and Jews are basically destined to become, they're destined to this intellectual soft tyranny for the rest of their existence.
Right.
Literally living in a bubble that somebody else creates for you, and if you step out of it, they smack you on the head. And like a good little boy brought up on 60s ideology of 60s parenting ideas being brought up by television, basically.
Yeah.
You're just gonna go back and do what you're told.
Huh. All right, so now we have the Egyptians out there, and they got smacked, and they still stayed, and
yeah. And actually, if you notice, if you compare, for example, the revolution in Egypt from the 25th of January all the way out to about 17, 18 days later, when the tyrant one tyrant left, but his torturer is still there. But you compare that to any of the revolutions in the Baltic states after the fall of the Soviet Union, in Eastern Europe right after the Soviet Union, and the ones happening even in the past 2-3 years, like in Ukraine and Georgia and so forth and so on. And you compare the reaction of the regimes to their people in these revolutions compared to what's happened in Tunisia or Egypt, and it's a completely different ballgame. The Egyptians rose up against extreme prejudice by their regime. They were being shot at. As far as I know, there was no shooting in the revolutions in any of these Eastern European Baltic states and Balkan states.
Huh. So I mean,
the color revolutions of the past few years and the original revolutions from the fall of the Soviet Union back in 91, 92, and 93, and so forth.
Right.
the pink revolution and the orange, and I forget what other colors they had in there. Right. Basically, in a couple of days, they went and sat in front of the parliament. A couple of days later, okay, the regime left.
Yeah.
Okay, the police came in, maybe stood in front of the people, and and that was it. And I'm not putting down their movements, far from it. Every people, of course, deserve the freedom that is theirs by God's divine grace. But I'm saying that what Muslims face is far more oppressive than anything faced by anybody else outside, possibly of maybe communist China.
Yeah, I was just going to say, China, they're pretty brutal over there when those people start to rise up.
And that's why we did our talks about China before. We did our separate talks about China, and hopefully we'll finish those lectures on the danger of the Chinese regime on the whole planet, really, not just the Chinese people, but on the whole planet.
Huh.
And that's why the repression is so extreme against Muslims. It's because Muslims refuse to take it sitting down, unlike many other people. And the reason is because of their the Islamic traditions of individual freedom.
Right. I mean, like whether they really know why they're doing it or not. They're just...
You're raised in it. You're raised that there is God and then there is you and nobody in between.
Yeah.
Okay? 5 times a day you prostrate directly to your Maker.
And no one else.
You are told that you're not supposed to prostrate to anyone else, or else your whole religion is void.
Huh.
That's why you never see a Muslim prostrate in front of another man.
Right.
Even when we're praying, you make sure there's no one standing in front of you, even by accident.
Right.
And if there is, you put a chair or put a barrier, so that clearly he's behind the barrier and he's not...
Exactly.
Whether it's a human or an animal or anything, or an idol or a statue, you make sure there's no such thing.
A picture
or an idol, a statue.
Yeah.
Make sure there is no such thing in front of you. While what do we have in the West? In America, people pay allegiance to a flag.
Yeah.
They all stand there in front of a flag with their hand on their heart and start blabbering nonsense to a flag. In Islam, this is forbidden. I am not going to worship a flag, you silly person.
That's a comedy skit.
Yeah, exactly. This is no different. Well, this is where historical perspective is important. This is no different paying allegiance to the Emperor of Rome or to the Pharaoh of Egypt 3,000 years ago.
Yeah.
It's the same goddamn thing.
So
they just changed donkey for jackass and said, oh, it's a different thing now, see?
Right. Well, actually, that's a good point because now Suleiman is in there. So he's there's like a bait and switch going on now, right?
Actually, it's worse than that. Mubarak is actually a nice guy compared to Suleiman.
Really?
Suleiman was he's the guy who did all the dirty work. Mubarak, as far as I know, was not in any police dungeon, drilling some poor Muslim activist with a drill through his back skin. Suleiman was the one doing that. Suleiman is the monster with blood on with innocent Muslim blood and probably even some Coptic blood on his hands.
Right.
And now what does that mean? This is where logic and strategy is important. That means that if he stays in there during this interim regime, he will make absolutely sure, okay, that whoever comes to power will not answer any calls from family members or victims for justice. Which of course will come. They will certainly come because there's thousands of victims. Tens of thousands of relatives of victims who are going to come. And if you get just one of them, if you just get one of these Egyptians and saying, my son disappeared 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 15 years ago, in this prison right here, he was arrested by those 2 police right there. I want to know where he is.
SubhanAllah.
And if you follow any one of these trails, you're going to end up with Suleiman. And Suleiman knows this. Egyptians might, most Egyptians might have forgotten this except for the victims.
Yeah.
Or they might want to choose to forget this, but the victims can't forget this.
But
how does a mother forget her son? I mean, how does a father forget his son?
So this is what Suleiman is thinking about.
Suleiman right now, and Mubarak before he was kicked out by the military council, by the way.
Yeah.
That's what I started saying at the beginning. I didn't finish saying, so I'll say it right now. Mubarak did not hand in power. He was made irrelevant by the military council. If you look at on Thursday, the military council was already making governmental decisions which rendered Mubarak irrelevant.
Huh.
If you're on Thursday, the military council was already saying that they will make sure that the demands of the people are met. No one can make this kind of a statement unless they have the power to follow through.
Interesting. Okay, so on that line
Mubarak
of thought,
was made irrelevant.
why isn't Suleiman irrelevant
I want
then?
to state this again so that people can go back and research the exact details for themselves. And for the sake of history, Mubarak did not step down. Mubarak was forced out. He was made irrelevant by the military council, which responded to people's petition and demands positively, and basically they took the reins of power in the country and said, we're going to make sure things go well.
Yeah.
Which means basically Mubarak can't make them go unwell.
Right.
He was basically made irrelevant. From his perspective, he had no other choice. He was irrelevant.
Huh. Okay, that makes sense.
Now, the thing is, Suleiman is, in one sense, he's much easier. If the protesters keep their demonstration for another couple of days, inshallah, Suleiman is gone. Because Mubarak had 30 years in power. He had 30 years in power to lose, so to speak.
Yeah.
Suleiman he was never the ruler of Egypt. So it's much easier to get rid of him because the people surround the police and everyone else, they don't see him as the president. Nor the army, nor anyone else, except for a small gang of false flagging murderers and torturers.
You mean the people behind the church bombings and stuff like that?
Exactly, people like that, yeah.
Huh.
And a whole bunch of the extraordinary renditions and renditions and torturing Muslims for the sake of the Zionist thugs in the U.S. regime and in Tel Aviv.
Okay, so all protesters go home now. What happens?
They go home now. Suleiman is not gonna. I don't think he's gonna get more than 4 hours of sleep for the next couple of months, making sure that whoever comes up is buddy with him.
Huh.
Which means that he will not seek any kind of justice for the victims.
Interesting.
And there are thousands of victims. Okay? I assume at this point him and Mubarak probably gave up on the money they already scurried out to Swiss banks and elsewhere.
Yeah.
I assume, because there was a story that Swiss banks have already frozen Mubarak's accounts.
Right. Oh, that's almost like pigeonholing these guys, forcing them to stay.
But again, strategically speaking, speaking about strengths and weaknesses of the two sides in this chess game, this is as weak as Suleiman's going to be in a long time.
Interesting.
It's right here today on this day of Friday, February 11th, I believe.
Yeah.
It's probably past midnight right now in Egypt. But they should stay and remain in the square, demand that Suleiman leave. The problem, of course, is just going to appoint one of his criminal torturers in there, someone he knows is as dirty as him. But that's, of course, still better than having him in power.
Yeah.
Because of just the way things work out. But
what's their way around this? I mean,
the only way around it is a little complicated, and when you're talking large groups, complicated maneuvers are difficult. Just like in any war, for example, when you're dealing with an army.
Yeah.
You can't, if you draw up a very complicated strategy for a group of 100,000 soldiers, you might as well just pack up and go home because it's not going to work.
Right.
And this is, we're talking millions of people. But unfortunately, there's no way around it. I don't see any other way. And historically, when these things have succeeded, the people didn't go home until they had elected a leader. So the Egyptians need to stay in the square, organize themselves somehow to elect an interim, let's say an overseer or an oversight committee of the election, someone who will run the elections for them.
Huh.
Only then should they go home.
So traditionally, you're saying these things don't work unless a leader is selected.
Exactly, yeah. They never work. I mean, all these pink and color revolutions. What's her name? The lady in Ukraine who actually won after the revolution. Yashchenko, I forget her name. Yulia Yashchenko or something like that. Only a couple of days ago, she wrote an article, I believe that was in Al Jazeera, complaining that basically how her revolution and her people's revolution was completely stolen from them. But, a bunch of, I guess, capitalist thieves, or I read the article very, very briefly, scanned through it. But I believe, if I understood it correctly, somebody had basically just stolen their revolution from them.
Huh.
Okay. Now the Ukrainians don't have a history of repressive, murderous regimes like Egypt, or like most of the Arab world. But so it's not. But so whatever is happening, it's probably mostly just stealing and corruption in Ukraine. In Egypt, that's not the big problem. The big problem is killing and murdering and tormenting and torturing, and imprisoning and shackling the 85 million people. So you can't even go to the street with a sign saying "I protest." But I mean, this has got to sound strange. I mean, like, how are the people going to take this? Like you're saying right now in the
choice.
square.
If they need to take a break, half of them need to go home and get 8 hours of sleep, take care of their families and businesses, whatever, and come back, and the other half, do the same afterwards. So be it. But they should not leave that square. They should not leave their, their demonstration, their revolution should not come to an end until they have elected someone to represent them, either an interim president,
I guess,
or an interim electoral council, or something, someone to oversee that the former thugs and torturers don't sabotage the revolution. And that's exactly what they're going to do. It's natural, it's automatic, it's mathematical. How do you expect these murderers to allow you to elect someone who's going to throw them in jail?
Right, because they're looking at a lifetime in jail, if not execution.
Execution, actually, in the Egyptian law.
So I mean, I guess the whole country is there. So there's no reason why you cannot have elect a leader right there. What's the cost, right?
Well, it's a talk we should do separately, but since we don't have time, this has to do with the idea of democracy.
Yeah.
The word democracy is a Greek word, rule of the people and so forth and so on. But it's just a word. It's a word that means a lot of things to a lot of people. Most people, when they think of democracy, they think of ballot boxes.
Yeah.
They think of the choice of the people. The power of the people.
Right.
Most people think one of these along these lines. But democracy, technically, when it comes down to it, democracy means ballot boxes, choosing representatives and ultimately, figures of power through ballot boxes. Huh. Now, it doesn't have to be this way, but that's why. But that's the reason the propagandists always speak of democracy. Now, what does that mean? This is again where historical perspective and also being able to think outside the box is extremely important. Why just the word democracy? Why do I have to use a word from a bunch of Greek homosexuals from 2,300 years ago? Aren't there any other traditions of governance by consensus in the rest of the planet? Why should I believe one of the smallest, dinkiest little tribes out of the Aegean, beyond the Aegean Sea, and use their word for something that other people might have been doing for thousands of years, before and after, in a completely different way?
I mean, you're right, because this is the Sunnah. I mean, after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed, wasn't it right in the center there where they selected who the next caliph was going to be?
Well, that's what I'm getting to. But first I want you to understand that there's manipulation here, that is ideological, mimetic manipulation. That everybody has tunnel vision about this. Now, the Westerners, the Judeo-Christian imbeciles, it's forgivable. They still live in their little bubble. It's a happy, comfy little bubble. It's padded with the corpses of millions of blacks and Arabs and Chinese, whether it's the Opium War or the Boxer War or the Boer War or any of the thousands and thousands of campaigns of murder and massacre across every continent of the globe. So their bubble is nice and comfy, especially in Western Europe and North America.
Yeah.
It's got babies all around the bubble. There's not a place you can fall, and break your knee, because everywhere you fall, there's a little nice black or Arab or even European baby.
Yeah.
So
to
critical thinking is not needed, basically.
well, why should you think when you live in a freaking bubble, which is explains the obesity epidemic but even more than the obesity epidemic, the epidemic of insensitivity that you have in the Judeo-Christian world.
Yeah.
Which, of course, the proof is in the pudding itself. These very campaigns of murder that they call wars that we were blabbering about, they explain itself the problem.
Right.
As the expression goes, how's the expression go? The truth is in the pudding. What is that?
The proof is in the pudding. Yeah.
The proof is in the pudding. The proof is in the pudding, as they say. The fact that somebody can go on these, 1,000 years of massacres. I mean, these people just don't stop. They never learn. You think, okay, this year they just massacred, 100,000 Iraqis. Hopefully next year they'll stop and go, you know what, that was a big mistake. Oh my God, 100,000 mothers, who will never see their babies come home to them. Oh my God,
right.
100,000 fathers who, their sons are gone. They're dismembered in front of them.
Yeah,
they never do this.
Right.
Why? Because they live in a comfortable bubble, padded with millions of, of fleshy little babies.
So what's the trick? What's the trick with democracy then?
Okay, so the first thing you have to realize is, why democracy? Why do I have to use a Greek word? Why couldn't I use an English word? Let's say, all right, I'm an Englishman. I come from the English Islands, the English Isles. I'm sure we had some way to elect our leaders before.
Yeah.
A bunch of homosexual, ancient Greeks showed up and blabbered their fantasies to us. Or if I'm French, I would say, well, or if I'm Sub-Saharan African, Tanzania, well, our own tradition of way, how did we elect leaders? Now, granted, a lot of places they had kings and royalty and everything else. So did the Europeans.
Yeah.
In fact, so do a lot of European countries even today.
Yeah.
Okay, they still have kings and queens and princes. But the important thing is it is no attempt to look at anything else. Okay, there's a tunneling of the vision of the population. You got to do it this way. The democracy. We want democracy. The President of America, every president, we want democracy. You have to have democracy wherever you are. The French president, the British prime minister, the German chancellor, all of them, democracy, democracy. They all say and sing the same tune.
So true. So
and you got to sit there and go, what the hell's wrong with you? You bunch of,
brainwashed,
homosexually inspired.
Yeah.
Homosexually inspired they're Christians. What's wrong? What's going on here? Well, and in fact, why do you have to use the word democracy? Why can't you use the French or the German or the English word for it or the Arabic word for this? What exactly is involved in this concept, democracy?
Well, it's electing, right? I mean,
supposedly it's about choosing your representatives, the ones who are going to rule on your behalf.
Like we have here.
Exactly, yeah. That's the idea. That's the general idea. Now, the problem why the word democracy, it's in how you do it. When they use this foreign abracadabra magical word, that's why foreign words are important. That's why, fancy people speak using foreign words. You get it? You see when somebody's talking, you say, well, par excellence, the best word for this is democracy.
Or coup d'etat.
You get it? It's
yeah.
like, oh, it's amazing. Whatever he said, it must be true. Yeah? I mean, who the hell's going to stand up and say, I have no idea what you're talking about. Could you please explain yourself? Yeah. I mean, who's going to be the Luddite who's going to, make a fool of himself, so to speak?
Yeah, what does that word mean?
Democracy. But somebody should actually ask the American president, democracy, exactly what do you mean by democracy? And when you put them on this, and of course when you do, and if somebody did do this, and they never do, but the answer does come. It's not an answer. They tell you next. Like for Egypt right now, the American president actually just said that he wants elections. Yeah. There's actually 3 words they use. Free, something, something, elections.
Fair.
Free, fair, and whatever. Elections.
Transparent. Free.
Fair and transparent elections.
Yes.
Now, here's the funny part. When you actually get down to the technicalities, to the details, they're neither free nor fair and certainly not transparent. Let's start with the last one, transparent. The way these guys do elections is actually un-Islamic. It's not allowed in Islam to do elections that way. For most cases. There are cases where it might be, but in most cases, certainly for electing a leader,
Yeah.
this is not Islamic. It's not allowed.
What?
A ballot box with anonymous votes, where someone goes with a piece of paper with their candidate's name on it, okay, and they throw it in a closed box.
Huh.
This is not allowed in Islam, and it was never practiced by the Prophet ﷺ. It was never practiced by his companions or anyone afterwards. And any hillbilly with common sense who hasn't been tarnished with a civilized education would understand why. Because if you've ever been to the circus or to your local fair, you would have seen a guy there dressed in a very outlandish costume with a box, just like the one they use for voting, and he pulls a whole rabbit out of the thing. After he just showed you that it has no bottom at all.
Yeah.
So you would think that you're highly educated, political science majors and so forth and so on, that they would understand this. Wait a second, you're going to send 10,000 of these boxes, let's say across Egypt or across the United States or across France, okay? And you're going to have the local mayor, leader, whatever, a clique of local power dealers. And people are going to come in such a way that when they put their anonymous vote in there, none of them knows what the other guy did.
Right.
You have no idea if you're in the majority or the minority, or what kind of majority or what kind of minority. It could be that 99% of the people who worship at your specific local ballot box are all for one candidate and against the other. But
Right.
You have no clue of that because of the anonymity of this Western con called democracy.
Okay, so where's the root of it though? What's wrong with it?
The root is right there. It's right there. It's that anonymous. It shouldn't be anonymous. If you go to vote someone, this is the most important decision in the government of a country.
So you should let everyone know who you're
Everybody should
voting
know who you're voting for, and everybody should know who someone else is voting for.
Huh.
The game, of course, they play is that while there could be repercussions, there could be retribution and vengeance and all kinds of silly stuff, which actually, for the wise, it actually rules against those who speak for an anonymous vote. Because you should have the courage of your vote. A vote, of course, is from the Latin voce, means voice.
Yeah.
And in fact, actually, the very word means to speak up.
Interesting.
Speak up. I vote for, that's my candidate right there, that man over there is my choice for leader of our community.
Right. So, but they say your voice is in the vote.
Stand up. You actually stand up.
Huh.
Traditionally, the way it's supposed to be done, the way it works. Not only you stand up, so traditionally, sometimes you even go up and put your hand on top of the hand of your choice of leader.
Yes.
And others join in and they all put their hands on top and say, meaning, we are with you. We will support your leadership.
Actually, isn't that how Muslims did it?
That's how it was done with the Prophet ﷺ. It doesn't have to be necessarily like this. It depends on the occasion. There's details here that I'm not going into. The kind of leader you're choosing.
Right.
I mean, if you're choosing a leader, for a trip or a journey you're taking together, it's not the same as choosing your leader in a war campaign.
Right.
It's definitely not the same as choosing the leader who's going to, lead the country through a period of peace.
Right.
But still, the idea of transparency is important. But this is again that double speak, that kind of Orwellian double speak.
Yeah.
Transparent, but completely opaque. A black box, an opaque black box with a hole at the top, a very small hole, just to make sure, and a name written on the piece of paper that's folded away so you can't even tell what's on it if you happen to peek at it, and then it's put away in that box, and you don't get to be there to count.
Right. So basically, it's a scam to cancel out your vote, I guess you could say.
Yeah, and of course, if you're one of those hillbillies, like you actually been to the circus or fair and seen that clown guy with the outlandish costume put a rabbit out of a box, you're probably thinking, are you kidding me? This is ridiculous. And actually, It's comical in the sense that it's so stupid that people don't figure it out.
Yeah.
It's just something about humans in general. That, hundreds of millions of us can be sitting there looking at a con right in front of us, and not a single one to go, oh, excuse me, wait a second.
Yeah.
But the proof is, again, is simpler than that. In Egypt, they had elections for 30 years. Well, every so many years.
Sure. Yeah.
And do you know what the results were?
I think I remember 99.5% he would win all the time.
There you go. Now you tell me, what do you think happened? Do you really think that the Egyptians who came in their millions, their massive millions in every town and village in Egypt the past 17, 18 days, and expressed the most extreme opposition to that thug, outright, disgust with him and his rule and his regime and everything he stands for, and demanded over and over again that he resign and leave. In fact, actually, most of the people sides actually were demanding that he leave. They wanted him out of the country. They don't want to live in the same place with him.
Right, but you wouldn't know it.
Said Irhal over and over again. Irhal, travel away. Go away.
Right.
They don't want to be with him in the same country. They hate his guts for good reason.
Right. So that whole
monster. But again, you go back over those elections, and I defy anybody to go check this out. Anybody who doesn't believe my argument about the hoax of the so-called democracy, as far as symbolized or as outlined, as affected in ballot boxes, or any idea of anonymous vote, just check out the Egyptian elections or Tunisian elections before that gorilla runoff.
okay.
His other thug is his gorilla cousin in Saudi Arabia.
Okay. Well, so I can see why that's un-Islamic.
Like you mentioned, the results were always 99% for Mubarak.
Right.
99.5% for Mubarak. What happened? I'll tell you what happened. Somebody pulled a huge rabbit out of an empty box.
Right. And just manufacture this consent that everyone likes the guy.
Exactly. And again, the more important thing, this is the technical part about ballot boxes. Ballot boxes not only allow you to pull a rabbit or 100,000 votes that were not there, or 10,000 or 1,000,000 votes, or 100 million votes if you want. You can pull as many votes out of a box, out of a closed box as you want. Not only do they allow you to pull this trick and basically put any candidate you want in power, but they do something even more important than this. You know what it is?
No.
They buy off the acquiescence of the voters. Anybody who stuck a vote in there, all those Egyptians who voted against the thug, and it was probably close to 99% who voted against the thug in the previous elections.
Yeah.
Because they went to these magic, these magicians' boxes and stuck their little vote in there. It means they accept the results.
Huh. Yeah, it's almost like signing on the dotted line.
You pay to play, so to speak.
Yeah.
You get it? I mean, if you and I sit down, right, and we agree, and I agree to sit down with you and play a game of I don't know, a game of cards, a game of poker.
Yeah.
Well, of course, we're Muslims, we don't gamble. But let's say I agreed to do this with you because I felt I could win.
Yeah.
What happens if I lose and you take away all my money?
You can't just say, no, it doesn't count, or...
Can I just say, well, no, we have to do it again?
No.
It doesn't work. I agreed to play.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yes, you automatically agree to the result.
Right.
Even if you're a professional poker cheater who screwed me over really bad because I was a dumb naive idiot.
Right.
You get it? I mean,
Yeah.
that's actually what happens in, what used to happen in
It
poker.
happens all the time, yes.
Is that they got professional poker players. They're basically taking a bunch of naive imbeciles for a ride. He plays the game professionally. He's doing counting all the time.
Yeah.
Your chances against him in a poker game are 1 out of 5.
Right.
And if you're gonna play 5 games with this guy, you're screwed. You're gonna win and lose 4. You win 1 and lose 4, or some such numbers.
Yes.
You get it?
Yeah.
Or people who gamble, go to do a roulette game in a casino. The deck is stacked against you. The house wins.
Right.
But how many people do you see protesting at the gates of a casino? Not fair, not fair. Give me my money.
Right, and
You ever see a demonstration in front of a casino, people saying that, I've done the math, I went and did the calculation.
This is crazy.
This odds are not fair.
This is illogical.
It's 80% for the house and 20% for me.
I mean, that's a side note, but I think
No,
it's a real...
It demonstrates against the casino, because when you walked in there and you put your finger on that knob or that button, or you picked up that set of cards off the table, you agree to the rules.
Exactly.
You understand?
Yes.
So when you walk over to the place of elections, wherever the ballot box, the magic box is, and you picked up a piece of paper and scribbled on it the name of your chosen candidate, or you picked up you tore off one off of a book of candidates.
Yes.
You agreed to the rules. You agreed to the game.
Huh.
And that's the most important thing about democracy. And now it brings me to my old definition for democracy. Democracy is the most effective method for the smallest group of people to control the largest group of people. Now, I'm going to go over it again because it bears repeating. It's a technical definition. It's the most effective manner by which a small group of people, the smallest group of people, can control the largest group of people. You know what that means? I mean, a small group of people can control a large group of people with guns, for example.
Exactly.
Through pure brutal tyranny, right?
Right.
But democracy actually is better than that. It allows an even smaller group of people to control an even larger people. For example, let's say with the handguns. With a handgun, you can get maybe we might get a 1 to 50 ratio.
Right.
Right, 1 to 20 ratio, maybe 1 to 10. Let's say handgun. Let's say it has a magazine of 10 bullets. The old ones. The new ones, I think, they're restricted to what? They're restricted to what, 6 or 8 or something like that. But anyway, let's say 10. So really, the most you can control is maybe 20.
Yeah.
For somebody figures, well, gonna fire off 5 or 10 or whatever. The last one survives. We're gonna get you. So
yeah.
Let's say you have a machine gun, right? Okay. Let's say you can control 50, 100.
Yeah.
Okay, so you got one guy with a... Actually, it's not even... You can't even do that, because by the time you fire off a couple or 2 or 3...
Everyone sits down.
They're already on you.
Yeah.
So, it's more a matter of numbers of how many soldiers or thugs you got, or police, to use the Islamic terminology. How many policemen do you need to control 100 people?
Yeah.
Okay, if it's just guns by themselves, just brutal force, you'd need, let's say, even with modern weaponry, you'd need 1 to 100. You get it? 1 to 50. If the people are determined to get rid of you.
Yes.
Actually less. If they're determined to get rid of you, you're likely to get away with 1 to 20. You understand?
Yeah. So this is
like... With democracy, you can really have 5 people control 1 million people.
5 control 1 million?
Absolutely. If you can get those idiots to go and vote, okay, to go stick their useless piece of paper in the magic box, okay? Once they vote, and you go, I have 5 candidates. This is your candidate A, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 20, or 50 candidates, or 2. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Okay? Make sure you are, one of the candidates. You meaning the tyrant or the usurper. Once they all put their vote in the box, say, okay, well, I'll be right out. Let me just do the counting.
Huh.
Okay.
I mean, you know what? I'd have to say you're wrong, just because. I mean, look, there's 50 states. That means there's like 2 representatives or something like that in each state, or.
Well, you want me now to do all for you?
That's a lot.
Over there, piece of tissue, and clean out your nose for you. It works. The whole point is it's a magic trick. Yeah. How does the magician pull a rabbit out of a ballot box? There's probably 50 different ways that each magician uses to do that trick.
Yeah.
Everything from a rabbit in the sleeve to a false bottom to a false side to a hole in the ground.
Okay. Okay.
the details, the devil is in the details. That's the whole point, is you've allowed room for trickery.
Yeah.
For example, here in my own locality, in the United States, that's exactly what they did. They actually closed off the doors in the 2004 election.
That's right, yeah.
Where they're going to do the counting. And
Right.
they basically did whatever they want. And actually, it was what allowed Bush, the smirking chimpanzee, to win. It was this state right here.
Right.
Do you understand?
Mm-hmm.
Before Florida, this is actually where he won. They secured, and the way they did it is a bunch of thugs. After the voting day was over, around 5 or 6 p.m., they just took the boxes into the seat of government, the government building in one of the counties, and closed off the doors. There were actually reporters who said, we'd like to be present.
Yeah.
And they were told, no, you're not going to be present. And the people who said this were Republicans. The ones who did the counting were Republicans. Pro smirking chimpanzee.
Right. Then, of course, the Diebold.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and of course, that's exactly why. Like they want to do electronic voting. That's why all these thugs want to do electronic voting. They got so lazy, they don't even want to play. They don't even want to use the old trick.
Yeah.
You make it even easier. Just have a computer, rig the numbers, and they won.
All right. So basically,
Wait, Mubarak, 99.5%. 30 years of winning the vote by 99%.
Yeah. Obviously.
That's all you need to know. It's just like the 911 false flag operation. All you need to know is look at the buildings crumble down.
Right.
Use your eyes. Look at the buildings crumble down. That's all you need to know. If you have eyes to see, ears to hear, and a mind with which to ponder.
Right.
If you don't have that, then, all the blabbering of the world will not convince you.
All right. So, clearly this stuff is un-Islamic then. Okay. So how is it Sunnah then to elect?
1 second. You're breaking up on this side.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now it's better. Yeah.
Okay. I was saying, clearly it's un-Islamic then, this whole thing, to this way of electing a leader.
Oh, well, yeah, we have something much better, and Muslims should speak up and offer it up to the world.
So where does the Sunnah come in
It should be
here?
an open, transparent vote.
Huh.
The vote should be open. I don't care how you manage it. Do it at the local level. Do it in a cascade manner, where basically people in every locality choose a representative who goes on to the next level up to the provincial level, and they choose a representative, and then eventually those representatives end up in a parliament, and they get to choose a president. But they do it openly,
Right.
by voce,
Yeah.
by open vote, by standing up, reading out his name and who he represents, and saying, "That's my candidate right there. That's the one I vote for." I give my voice to that one right there. And everybody can see and count who's voting for who. You get it?
Yeah, I see. And that's free and transparent then.
Now, that's real free and transparent, yeah. Now, of course, some people can say, well, what if it's a bad regime and the people are afraid and this and that? Well, that's why only courageous people get to become leaders.
Interesting.
That's the whole point of this. It makes sure that you can't have, corrupt or cowardly people become leaders who can be easily corruptible.
That's true, yeah.
Only people are going to say, you know what, I know you're so-and-so is threatening me, or so-and-so is not going to like my vote, but you know what? This is my vote of conscience. I'm willing to stand up for it. Do you understand? Man, and ultimately, that's what the Egyptians did these last 17, 18 days.
Yes.
They defied the tyrant, even though they were common citizens, common civilians, common people. They stood up and said, "No more. That's it."
So
should they expect their representatives to stand up and make the choice of the people and and choose for the?
So they have every right to this then.
Yes, yeah, but but they should not. If they quit now and allow Suleiman and his buddies and his clique, his gang of torturers, any time at all, even 3, 5 days, 7 days, it's enough for them to start eliminating more possible leaders for the Egyptian people. In fact, that's actually the problem. That's another aspect that actually deserves a talk all by itself. which is the reason why it took 17, 18 days in Egypt, and why it's taken so long in Muslim countries, is because all these populations, the whole ummah has been decapitated over and over again. Every time a leader amongst the Muslims of Egypt and the Christians of Egypt, the people of Algeria, the people of, and previously Morocco, Tunisia, Saudi Arabia, every time some person comes up and demands justice for the people, they are murdered, tortured, silenced, exiled.
Right.
Over and over again. I mean, literally thousands of them. So what you had, and this is history really, an aspect of the history of the Muslim countries that has not been well analyzed. But what you have is there are no leaders. There are there's no leadership candidates. It's not that there are no leaders. I'm sure we have, inshallah, a lot of highly qualified individuals who might, but they're completely unknown.
Yeah.
They're completely untested and tried because they can't speak, because they've seen what happened to the last guy who spoke up. He was tortured by Suleiman. He had drills run through his back by Suleiman and his thugs, or by Israeli Jewish torturers. Yeah. Or by Afghani torturers overseen by American advisors. Do you understand?
Yeah, yeah, I see that.
And this is a peculiar phenomenon in the Muslim world, that the enemies of personal freedom, true personal freedom, the ones who don't want that idea, that meme to spread across the globe, because it would mean, basically, for one, to all the Zionist Jews, it would mean that they can't rule over anybody, because everybody's going, excuse me, I don't think you're that chosen. Yeah. That favored in any manner, and I don't think you have anything over me. Or that their leader, their smirking chimpanzee in the United States, Bush Jr., can't tell them what to think about, what not to think about. That they shouldn't think about 9/11 and who was behind it, because that's unpatriotic. Right. Okay? And they can't allow the Pope to tell them whether they should question a bunch of priests boogering some choir boys as as indecent and filthy, or should justify it as the fad in the 70s.
Yeah, I read that.
That was the Pope's justification. In the 70s, everybody was boogering children.
Yeah, seriously, everyone was doing it. What's the big deal?
Pig.
Yes, that's disgusting.
And people forgive this trash. People forgive this guy, and this is what Islam comes in. Is while we might look the other way for some things when it comes to personal lives. Clinton having an adulterous affair with his intern, but some things that concern the rest of the people. The things that concern other people, those we don't look past, because they're a matter of justice. Yeah. That when it's about oppression, you should be quiet. It should end. It's oppression of God's free creatures. Yeah. That's that's an aspect of Egyptian and Tunisian revolutions. And inshallah, God willing, any other revolutions in the Muslim world that might throw off the rest of these old, decrepit Zionist regimes, or I should say Zionized, as in co-opted by Zionists regimes. And notice that Zionized rhymes with sodomized.
So it's not over that for the Egyptians, and they should keep on.
It would really be unfortunate if they stop now.
It's theirs to lose.
Suleiman is nothing at all compared to Mubarak. Suleiman is nothing at all compared to Mubarak now, but he might become a big obstacle if he is allowed time to entrench himself in government. Yeah. Okay? So far, he was just the Grand Inquisitor of the Church of Mubarak.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all he was. He was some thuggish, scurrying, shadowy figure in the background in the deep dungeons of police stations and mukhabarat stations across the country. That means he was not much of anything to the military leadership, to the administrative, ministerial leadership, and others. But if he's allowed another week or 2 weeks, a month, 2 months, 3 months, he might begin to perpetuate or perpetrate or force upon these levels of governance himself. Do you understand? He might force an image of himself as the leader of the country, of all these organizations, of all these national institutions. And if you get to that point, the inertia takes over. It becomes a lot harder for those institutions to disobey him, or to stand against him, or simply to stand aside from him and simply not support him, which they're more willing to do now. In fact, right now, they don't see him as anything. Who is Suleiman? Who is he to tell me? The president tells him what to do.
Right, he came out of nowhere, basically.
Suleiman is, you should go back to the dungeon and go back to... Actually, you shouldn't go back to torturing innocent people.
He should go to a dungeon, though.
Back to the dungeon so he can lock the door and throw away the key.
Yeah, how does it feel?
So on a serious note, the Egyptians, I hope to Allah that I have outlined the salient points of this affair enough that one can easily make a decision. It's not an easy decision to make, but wallahi, it is much easier to make it today, tonight, than it is to make it tomorrow, and it's easier tomorrow than the day after, and after that it gets harder and harder and harder again.
Yeah.
And Allah forbid, it might actually get so hard, it might become even worse under Suleiman or some thug like him than it was under Mubarak. And let me explain. This is actually a topic for a whole lecture by itself. In 1991-92, I forget the exact date, the Algerian people finally rose up against another thug, another Mubarak-like thug that was ruling over them, and basically demanded national elections. And when they finally had those elections, the majority of the people of Algerians had chosen their candidates, Muslims from the majority of the people there, and it looked like the old regime was going to be literally thrown out completely.
Yeah.
None of them were going to survive the elections. And what they did was the help of the French and the American, the French regime and the American regimes, who came in from behind the scenes, supported the old regime, and pushed them on, literally egged them on to eliminate, to cancel the elections completely, imprison all the candidates of the people that the people had, quote unquote, democratically chosen, by the way. About 19,000 or so of these candidates were imprisoned. Not just candidates, they had actually won the elections. And then what happened after that, and this is what Suleiman is probably thinking right now, and his Jewish masters are, I'm sure his Jewish masters tell you, I've already had this conversation with him, if they're not having it with him as we speak, that from what he needs to do if he doesn't want to end up in a deep dungeon somewhere, him and the rest of his torturing thugs, and possibly Mubarak, is they need to get on the Algerian program. Now what does that mean? What the Algerian regime did after that is they murdered 100,000 of their people. They started these false flag operations. They started bombing mosques, administrative buildings, houses. They would attack whole villages in the mountains, attack them and murder everyone in there. Men, women, and children. Just complete an Islamic murder. Something unheard of in Islam, ever.
Yeah.
Never. There's no tradition like that. Of course, there's a large tradition like that of murdering, hundreds and thousands of people, of completely, women, men, and children in Europe. That's what the Inquisition was about. With all the Inquisitions and the witch hunts and then the wars of heresy and so forth and so on. A lot of times, people would run for help or succor in a church, even in America. They'd run to a church, men, women, and children, so hopefully to be safe from whatever marauding, group that was coming after them. And they would just surround them and burn the church down or kill everyone in the church.
That's right.
But this kind of murder is unheard of in Islamic history. And that's what happened in Algeria. And of course, it was the goddamn regime that was behind it, with the help of specific units in the military, not all the military, not the police. No. It was specific units of terrorists that were trained in the Jewish terrorist state. And now the military protected them, but the military had no idea who they were protecting. Military and the police would just be told, we need you to stand guard at this road. Set up a checkpoint so nobody goes this way. You understand?
Yeah.
Or we need you to accompany this vehicle or these 2 or 3 vehicles. You don't know who's inside and what they did, and and secure them all the way to the base so they can get to safety as soon as they finish murdering a whole village of men, women, and children. And then, of course, they would turn around and accuse the Muslims, the ones who won the elections. You get it?
Yeah.
And that's what's going to happen in Egypt.
That's satanic.
Okay, they're going to accuse extremist elements, who are demanding power for themselves. You get it? Well, basically, what they're going to do is literally try to avoid the whole revolution. They say, we're going to have elections, and they're going to have elections. They're going to put the same thugs back, find a whole bunch of thugs, that worked with the regime before.
Yeah, not hard to do.
Yeah, it is. As I said, there's probably up to 1 million of these thugs. Find them that are unknown to the people, so that it takes people a few months, a few years to figure out, who they are and what they're capable of. But by that time, they will have Egypt in the midst of a horrific murderous tyranny. And the whole time they're blowing up churches and mosques and houses and villages. They will accuse the revolutionaries, extremist revolutionaries. But they're not going to use the word revolutionary. I use that term that in the sense, the way tactically this works, the way strategically it works, they will accuse the people who rose up in revolution so it doesn't happen again.
In that square or something.
So anytime somebody goes to the square to start it off, they're going to say, these are the extremists who are doing this.
Huh.
Do you get it?
Yeah, yes, that's satanic.
It's extremely important believe me, it's much easier to stay in the square now and to take shifts and keep coming back until Suleiman and his thugs are gone and make sure they choose their leader right there.
Yeah, I mean...
Choose your leader right there in the square. Okay, and he demand that he is accepted by the military.
That's important. The military to accept it.
Yeah. They should choose their leader in this. They should do the election right now. Take a week out with the revolution and everything else and say, we're going to do it right here. People are going to come to the squares of every town and vote for their leadership. Send in a parliament to Tahrir Square and then have those people get together at Tahrir Square and choose a leader right there, a president. It's not hard to do. It's what would happen anyway. In fact, it's actually cheaper to do it this way.
Right.
Rather than organize a whole, one of those American electoral affairs. Which is
they're already there. They're already there.
Yes, every town and village, they should have their election in their square, open election, elect their representative, just like we would do a parliamentarian, send them in to Tahrir Square, and have them organize an open parliament, right there in square, and televise it, and choose a president.
And that's very important, I guess, to have it all televised. I mean, it's got to...
Yeah, of course, yeah. Well, there's going to be people with cell phone cameras and cameras. And plus, the state television should come and televise it, and not just, and, well, of course, they're going to demand, even now, they should demand that the internet is reestablished.
Well, the television is already on their side.
The internet should be reestablished.
Yeah. Huh.
You understand?
Yeah, absolutely.
The internet should be reconnected again, so people and cell phone and telephone communication should be reestablished. Why? If Mubarak resigned, if supposedly we got what we want, where's the internet? Where's the communications?
Right. This has to happen now, you're saying. I mean, this is...
Absolutely. So again, to recap, it's much easier to get rid of Suleiman today than tomorrow, and much easier tomorrow than the day after.
Yeah.
And Stu, Suleiman has to go. Suleiman is the guy who has all the secrets of the thuggish, oppressive regime. He's the one who holds all the ends of the strings of oppression. It wasn't Mubarak. Mubarak was just the thug at the top. the guy who actually took care of killing, murdering, tyrannizing, and torturing, took care of killing off opposition, and is cementing the regime of Mubarak in place, was this thug, this murderer. Okay? So you haven't changed, and you actually made it worse. Now you gave the murderer, the guy with blood on his hands, you gave him the reins of power.
Yeah.
Three. Suleiman has blood on his hands. Not only is he the effective agent of oppression under Mubarak, he's also the guy who has the most to fear. Because Mubarak didn't go out killing people with his own hands. He had this murderer and his gangs do it. What does that mean in this point number 3? It means Suleiman has everything to fear from a free, open election. He will not allow it. If there's anytime any candidates that come up and people start talking about them in the media, or anybody who looks like he has a chance at getting into power and is not going to be bought off or threatened by Suleiman and his gang, will be killed off, defamed, gotten rid of, imprisoned, whatever it needs. There are 1,000 options.
It's his thing.
And he will keep sifting and filtering through the electoral process until only the most cowardly are allowed to run, or only the ones who can be bought and corrupted. And once they might not be as corrupt as Mubarak at the beginning. They might be nice people, nice, decent, people. But the problem is they're corruptible.
Yeah.
Once they're in power, every day they're going to give in a little bit, until they become just like Mubarak, if not worse. And again, 4, if you allow Suleiman in, because he has the most to fear, and logically he will not allow real free elections, in order to make sure that after they put their thug or some corruptible imbecile in power, to make sure that people don't go back a month later or 3 months later to the square and say, you're not going to play us for fools, we're unemployed anyway, so we're just going to be unemployed in Tahrir Square and every other square in the country until we get what we want. In order to get rid of this chance ever happening again, they're going to do what the Jews with those murderers in Algeria did in Algeria for the past 20 years now. They're going to start murder on a massive scale. By the way, it's the same trick that was used in Iraq by the Kuffar. Ingrates used exactly the same trick to pacify Iraq. They just started blowing up mosques left and right and accusing Sunnis or Shiites of doing it.
To try to get a civil war. And
Shiites and Sunnis never did this to each other. They have 1,200 years of history together as neighbors in Iraq, and they never did this. And the only ones who say went to foment the hatred between Shiites and Sunnis. I mean, I'm not talking about theological difference. Yes, we are theologically different in many ways. We've always been theologically different. But the ones who want division and war and killing and dying of Muslims, the ones who do this are the ones behind those killings in Iraq. Because they're two sides of the same coin. You perpetrate the terrorism, and then you come out on the other side and say, aha, it's the other side who did it. It's the other side. Because if you're not coming out and saying who did it,
it's going to
then the people are going to, people are just going to take their guess who did it. They're going to say, oh, it's the Americans. They're the ones who stand the most to gain from this. And plus, this never happened until the Americans came and occupied the country.
Yes.
But instead, as soon as a mosque is blown up with a Shiite Sunni, as soon as a Kurdish wedding is blown up, within hours, you get on the media and you tell them who did it. It's the Al-Qaeda, it's the Sunnis, it's the Mujahideen, it's the Shiites, it's the
Sadrs.
It's the Al-Sadr revolutionaries or rebels. It's this and this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so and the same technique, and this is point number 4, is going to be used against the Muslims in Egypt and the Christians in Egypt, by the way. They will blow churches and mosques. They will blow secular and religious buildings and ceremonies, and they will do it to whatever level they want. They don't care. In fact, to them, it's just a matter of mathematics. They will keep killing until they get the reaction they want.
Because they have to.
It's Pavlovian mass psychology. You keep zapping the dog until you get the reaction you want. It's the way you train dogs, for example. You keep punishing. Every time you get the wrong behavior, you punish.
Right.
Every time the Egyptians say, the regime is doing it, you blow up something else. It's the same thing happening in Iraq. So there's millions of Iraqis who understand that it's the Americans and their terrorist contractors and their Jewish friends who are blowing up worshippers in mosques. No Muslim would ever blow up a mosque, ever.
Right.
It doesn't matter which mosque. No Muslim would even blow up a church, let alone a mosque.
Yeah.
Simply because of our understanding of God as
Right.
universal. That even those idiots who worship a cow, we understand that in a way it's misguided worship of God.
Right.
They just the devil substituted the cow for what they truly in their heart know is something universal.
Yes.
Instead, so that's why Muslims generally are a little more respectful when they're dealing with even the most idiotic pagans, unlike myself.
So I mean, okay, this
Yeah.
can work, especially if you consider the fact that this is how the Mahdi is elected, right?
Yeah, in a sense, actually, the Mahdi, the hadith that we do have about this, that the Mahdi al-Islam is elected in Mecca, is elected in an open, transparent vote right there at the Haram Sharif.
So I mean,
some 313 Muslims who come together in a sense, kind of like what happened in Tahrir Square in Egypt. Eventually, they're joined by thousands of others, locals and others. Another Hujjaj from elsewhere, till their numbers swell to about 12,000, according to this that we have about the event.
right. So yeah, I guess that's the proof you need, I guess.
But again, I cannot emphasize this enough. They should not stop. Stay in Tahrir Square, and if you need to go home, take care of your family, do your business, whatever, take shifts. Take shifts. Most of the country is unemployed anyway. I mean, 90% of the country, when you include women, children, old people, are without jobs.
Right.
80%. Okay, well, so you got nothing better to do. Well, yeah, because of the former regime. So might as well just use it, but do something, something useful.
Yeah.
Choose your own government. And do, of course, ultimately, it's all up to Allah. We simply seek to advise our brothers and sisters as best as we know how from, of course, the wisdom of our religion and the wisdom of our Prophet ﷺ, what we have learned from him as applied to, of course, to these modern problems.
Right.
And so that's it. والسلام على من تبع الهدى والسلام على المسلمين امين ورحمة الله وبركاته. We ask Allah to guide us to the straight path and choose for us, of course, that which is best for us.
Ameen.
Ameen. Yeah, I think that's it. You might as well close that.
All right.
Yes, because